Hey everyone, Alex here. I talk about self-improvement, simple living, mindful consumption, and fragrance. And in this video, I wanted to talk about the fragrance collecting mistakes that I made when getting into this hobby and discuss some of the things that I would do differently if I could restart from scratch. Now, one thing that I'd like to do at the start of every video is talk about my scent of the day. And today I'm wearing 1270 Extreme by Frappan. This is a beautiful fragrance. It is cognac and pineapple, and it's a little bit fruity. However, I don't know that I'll be buying a full bottle. I think that this little travel size is perfect for me, and I think that I'm just quite happy sticking with this. And I am going to talk about these small bottles in just a moment because this is something that I would do differently, and it ties into one of the mistakes that I made. Now, I've got 6 mistakes here to talk about, so let's get right into the first one. The very first mistake that I made is buying the biggest size bottle every time. Now, it's really easy when you get into this hobby because it is exciting and it's like a whole new world opens up. It's easy to be enticed to buy the biggest bottles when you find a fragrance that you like. And the reason why is because you feel like you're getting the best bang for your buck. You feel like you're getting the best deal because it's cheaper per milliliter compared to the smaller bottles. However, one thing that I've found is pretty much every single one of the full 100 ml plus bottles that I've bought, I've almost never used a full bottle. And I find that after maybe halfway, so maybe 50 to we'll say 70 mil, I've kind of had my time with that fragrance and I don't really want to use it anymore. And I find a new fragrance that I enjoy, and that's what I want to explore now. So I find that technically, whilst you're saving money per milliliter, you're actually wasting the money that you've spent on the rest of the fragrance that you're not even using. So I find by buying a smaller bottle, it helps you to validate if you actually like that fragrance or not. And if you run out of a smaller bottle, you can go and feel more confident buying a full size because you know that you actually like it and will wear it over time. So I've got 3 bottles here that are a lot smaller. I've got By the Fireplace by Maison Margiela, got Gentle Fluidity Silver by MFK, and then the one that I showed you just before, 1270 Extreme by Frappan. All of these are fragrances that I enjoy, but I think I enjoyed them more testing them out, and I enjoyed them more when they were new and there was still some novelty around the fragrances. Even though I like them, I don't know that I love them enough to buy full bottles, and that's why I'm really glad that I bought the smaller bottles. Like, if we take Gentle Fluidity Silver, for example, I've pretty much used the full bottle, but I find that to me, this smells so similar to Green Irish Tweed. Yes, I've got their differences, but it's a really similar scent profile. And I've got full bottles of Green Irish Tweed, so I don't feel the need to go and buy a full bottle of Gentle Fluidity Silver. The only reason that I would go and buy a full bottle is if I preferred that over Green Irish Tweed, which I don't. So the reason I like this small bottle is it allowed me to test this profile over time and really familiarize myself with it and really get a good understanding of how I feel about it, without committing to a full-size bottle, which is just hundreds and hundreds of dollars. Granted, this is expensive, and per mil, it's kind of outrageously expensive, but I would have preferred to spend more per mil but less overall than to save money per mil but spend more overall, if that makes sense, only to find out that I probably wouldn't wear the full thing. So that's why I like these small bottles. And the first mistake that I made was buying full bottles every single time. And it only took me about 100 bottles to realize, I say only, it took me 100 bottles to realize that you actually don't need to do that. That sometimes it is better just to buy the small bottles, because by the time you get to the end of it, oftentimes you realize that you've kind of had your time with it and you're ready for that next fragrance. So that's the first thing. The next thing that I would do differently, or the next mistake, is tying my self-worth and identity to fragrance. This is something that I see is really common, especially with young people. When we first get into fragrance and we see all of these influencers that have these really cool collections and they've got all these amazing, expensive and intricate and cool fragrances, it's really easy to feel like it's easy to aspire to that. And it's easy to try and attach your self-worth and your identity to a collection. And people don't just do this with fragrances. They do this with watches. They do this with shoes and handbags. But the truth is, no one really cares about your fragrance collection. The only thing people care about is whether or not you smell pleasant or whether you smell kind of bad. That's the only thing people really care about. If they're within your proximity, they're close enough to be able to smell you. If they enjoy what you're wearing, that's great. That's, doesn't really change their life. It's just nice to have you smelling nice. But if you don't smell nice, on the other hand, you don't smell good, of course they're going to care about that. But they actually don't care about your fragrance collection overall. Most people who aren't into fragrances actually think it's kind of ridiculous to go and amass this huge collection when you can only wear one fragrance at a time. So whether you have one fragrance or 100 fragrances, it makes no difference because people are only smelling that one fragrance on you at any given time anyway. So I think that a big mistake that I made was really attaching my self-worth to my collection. I felt like the bigger my collection was, or the more kind of exclusive fragrances I had in my collection, that I was a better person. And I understand that this is the wrong way of thinking. I was young. It was just a mistake that I made when I was younger to think that way. But I realize now that really your fragrance collection has nothing to do with your self-worth. No material possessions have anything to do with your self-worth. And I think that there are far more important things to attach that self-worth to, like how you treat people, how you carry yourself, how you move through life, your manners, your integrity. These are things that really define you as a person. Your fragrances, how you smell, your clothes, your shoes, that has nothing to do with who you are as a person. And so that was the second mistake, was really tying my identity and self-worth to my fragrances. The third thing is thinking that more expensive equals better. Now I've got two fragrances here to talk about, and this actually ties into the next point as well, but I'm going to use these for both examples. It's really easy when you are watching these fragrance influencers online who always hype up these expensive fragrances and talk about how incredible niche fragrances are and how much better the more expensive flankers of a certain fragrance are. It's easy to think that your kind of standard release eau de toilette is not good enough, and that in order to really get compliments and really have people appreciate your fragrance, you need to buy the more expensive version. Case in point, Chanel's Allure Homme Sport and Allure Homme Sport Eau Extreme. Now, Eau Extreme is more expensive, not just because it's a bigger bottle, but just because it is more expensive. But I actually prefer the original Allure Homme Sport. I think this smells better. For me, it's more enjoyable. For me, it's fresher. I also think it's more versatile and just more pleasant overall. But if I listened to the influencers and I listened to the people online, I wouldn't have bought this. I would have just skipped it and bought the Eau Extreme instead, and probably not enjoyed it as much. Now, I'm fortunate both of these were gifts, so I didn't spend any of my money on either of these. But if I was to go and buy these, I probably would have skipped this one, the original, and just gone straight to this. And then I would have been done with this fragrance profile, because I don't really enjoy this one. And I probably never would have explored the original. But I actually really love the original, and this is one of those comfort fragrances that I wear just for me when I want to smell nice. So it's not always better to spend more money on a fragrance. It doesn't mean that it's a better fragrance, it just means that it's more expensive. And this also doesn't just tie into the same fragrance line like Eau Extreme and the original. It also comes down to niche fragrances. If we take Davidoff Cool Water, for example, and we take Creed's Green Irish Tweed, both of those fragrances are by the same perfumer. They're from around about the same era. I think they're like a year or two apart in release. Granted, I do prefer Green Irish Tweed, but there are a number of people who would prefer Cool Water, even though it's 1/10 of the price. Green Irish Tweed is, $300 to $500, whereas Cool Water is about $30. And some people just prefer Cool Water. But if they were only focused on thinking that more expensive equals better, they would look at Green Irish Tweed and they wouldn't even give Cool Water a second thought. Whereas some people just think it's better. So I think that a really easy mistake to fall into is thinking that you have to spend a lot of money on fragrances. And the truth is you don't. You don't have to like a fragrance just because it's expensive. And you don't have to disregard a fragrance just because it's cheap. There are a lot of fragrances that are really cheap that I have in my collection that I really love. Like, for example, Cool Water. I don't really wear it, but I absolutely love it because it holds sentimental value for me. It was my father's signature scent. And I also love Coach for Men, the original Coach for Men, which I think I picked up for about $30. And I think that it smells almost niche quality. It's got suede, it's got nashy pear, it's peppery, it's very fresh, it's long lasting, it dries down beautifully, and it was like $30. And I think that it's better than a lot of my more expensive fragrances that I've bought. So expensive doesn't always mean better, and that's something that's really important to keep in mind. So the next thing is thinking that stronger is always better. And this is another thing, and I'm gonna pull out these Chanel fragrances again. The O Extreme is a stronger fragrance. It lasts longer, it is definitely stronger, and it projects more. But again, personally, I just prefer the smell of the original. And if I was only focused on performance and longevity and projection, I would only buy this, and I would never ever look at this one because it's not the strongest fragrance. But the thing is, it doesn't mean it's better. I think there's such a trend at the moment, and it's not just now, because this was definitely a thing back in the 80s from what I've heard, where people just wanted projection beasts and they just wanted everyone to smell them when they walk into a room. But it's definitely a thing now where on any fragrance video, you see the most common thing that people are talking about is projection, performance, sillage, longevity. But that stuff is secondary to the most important thing, which is just how it smells and how you feel about how it smells. Some of my favorite fragrances in the entire world are quite weak fragrances. They don't last, they're not strong, they don't project, and the only person that can smell them is my girlfriend when she gets right up in my neck. But they're some of my favorite fragrances because I love the way they smell. And because I love how they smell, I love to wear them. So it's not the end of the world if a fragrance that you love doesn't perform like an absolute beast. In fact, it's not always the best thing for it to perform like a beast anyway. Some fragrance profiles and some fragrance notes are better when they're in a more subtle fragrance, or when they're a little bit more intimate, or a little bit more kind of relaxed, if that makes sense. You don't always want to walk into a room and announce yourself. Sometimes it's actually classier. In fact, in most instances, it's classier to be discovered rather than to be announced. It's really not the worst thing in the world if a fragrance isn't absolutely blowing people away when you walk into a room. So just keep that in mind. Stronger does not always equal better. The more important thing is how you feel about how it smells. Okay, so that is the fourth thing. The next is buying fragrances because other people say that you need them. And this is huge, especially when it comes to fragrance influences. Now, I made a video a couple of days ago about some perfume oils that I was sent to try, and I really quite enjoyed them, but I made a point not to tell people to buy them because I don't think that it is appropriate for fragrance influencers to tell their audience that they have to buy something. I think the more important thing is that if you do want to buy something, you go and test it out and see how you feel about it on your skin and see how you enjoy it. So just because somebody says that you need to buy something or that you need it in your collection, it doesn't mean that you do. There are so many fragrances out there that get pushed upon you every single day in every single video that you watch, and they say this is a must-have, this fragrance, you can't have a fragrance collection without this fragrance. And of course you can. If you don't enjoy it, or if you don't love it, or if it's just kind of a like, but it's not an absolute love, you don't need it. And in fact, you could have a full collection of fragrances that no one's even heard of, but if you love them and you enjoy wearing them, that's really all that matters. And I think that it's really easy to fall into the trap of buying a fragrance just because you have been pressured into thinking that you have to have it. One of those fragrances for me was Creed Aventus. I paid $350, and whilst I like the fragrance, it still to this day annoys me that I let the noise on social media and on YouTube influence me to go and spend that money on the fragrance, whether I like it or not. The fact that I like it is a bonus, but the fact that my decision was driven by the pressure that I felt from these influencers, that frustrates me, and it's always had a sour taste in my mouth when it comes to Creed Aventus. So just because it's popular, just because people say it's a must-have and you need it in your collection, it doesn't mean that you do. And I've bought so many fragrances in the past because I felt that I needed to have them in my collection, and a lot of them I regret buying. So just keep that in mind next time you go and look at a fragrance. Are you looking at it because you are genuinely interested, or are you just wanting it in your collection because people say it's a must-have? It's really important. The final thing is thinking that you need a collection in the first place. At the end of the day, fragrances are an accessory. They're not an essential need, right? And they're a luxury. You don't need to have a full collection, and don't let anyone tell you that you do need to have a collection. As I said earlier in the video, people are only smelling one fragrance on you at a time anyway. So whether you have one fragrance or 1,000 fragrances, it makes no difference to the people that are just smelling you in day-to-day life. If you just have one fragrance that you feel confident when you wear, you love how it makes you feel, you love the smell, and you just enjoy wearing it, that's really all you need at the end of the day. With that said, don't let me make the decision for you. If you want to have a collection, you enjoy collecting, you're happy with having a collection, and you don't mind spending the money, by all means, you're welcome to go and create a fragrance collection. And I'm certainly not gonna, sit here and try and make you feel guilty for that. But you don't need a collection if you don't want one. If you're happy with the one fragrance that you get for your birthday and it just makes you feel good, and it's kind of just an afterthought, you spray it on, you smell good, and you go about your day, that's really all you need. So don't let people pressure you into having a collection or feeling like you're not enough because you don't have a collection. The people online that have hundreds and thousands of bottles, most of them either got all of those for free or they're struggling financially because they've bought way too much of a luxury when they could have been using that money for more important things. So those are the 6 things, the 6 mistakes that I made that I would urge you not to make when it comes to fragrance collecting. Any mistakes that you think that I've missed, please let me know in the comments below. Also let me know what signature scent you're wearing. Any other ideas for videos, don't forget to comment those, and if I think that they're a good idea, I might make a video about them. Please do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and share this with anyone who might find it helpful. Thanks for spending the time watching the video, and we'll speak soon.